Hello and welcome to Collectability Podcast, the podcast about all things Patek Philippe. Today I am talking to a remarkable talent. Born in Denmark, he started engineering in Copenhagen, but ended up stumbling on an infamous copy of George Daniel's Watchmaking, a book that is responsible for more than a couple of bright minds deciding to become great watchmakers. The next logical step saw him discarding the future as an engineer altogether by enrolling in the Ringsted School, which runs the only watchmaking course in Denmark. Christian Lars is 41 years old, lives and works in the beautiful countryside near Odense, Denmark, and he is an immensely talented watchmaker. Welcome to the Collectability Podcast, Christian, a podcast about all things Patek Philippe, and I think where you fit in perfectly.
Thank you very much, and thank you for having me on the podcast.
Oh, Christian, it's our pleasure. I bet John would love to be here with us talking to you. But Christian, I will split up this interview into three distinct parts. Your time before the Patek Philippe Museum, your time at the Patek Philippe Museum, and of course, your time after the Patek Philippe Museum, which will bring us to what you are doing in the present day. So tell us, Christian, after leaving the watchmaking school at Ringsted in Denmark, what doors did you knock on to end up with that incredible position as the sole watchmaker at the Patek Philippe Museum?
Yeah, it was not exactly like a straight journey from going when I went to the Patek Philippe Museum. First, I studied in Denmark with Søren Anderson, who is a former Academy member. And at my time in Søren's place, I had the opportunity to get to the General Assembly of the Academy, of the HCSI Academy, when they had a General Assembly. I think it was in 2004 in St. Croix in Switzerland. And there I get to know all the Academy members there, and we was with them with a couple of days over a weekend in the beautiful Jura mountains. And at that time, I have built like a little prototype watch for myself, which was a pocket watch movement, like a lady's one with a repeater and a chronograph on, where I have built a case for it. And the style I had at that time was a little bit like Jules Verne style, and it was in no way as good as the watches that the Academy members built. Of course, I was just in watchmaking school on my second year, but one of the members there, he saw something in it, and he told me to contact him when I was finished with the school, and that was Vianney Halter. And I managed to get a position in his place.
Which he also loves that style, the Jules Verne influence, which you can see on his watches.
Yes, exactly. I mean, there was we were just totally on the same level there, so not same level, but on the same style, and therefore he really like loved that watch and found it really interesting. And then later, when I got to work with him, that was such an interesting experience to get into his universe there and helping him with building the Antiquaires and classics and the Janvier classic and all these different models. So that was a super interesting time I had with him. So I worked for him for 3 years until we have like the financial crisis in 2009, and then there was if every company in Switzerland more or less laid off people because all the economy stopped. And it was the same situation for Vianney. So I was out searching for another job, and I was around and looking what I could get. And also because I want to get more into higher complications, like working with minute repeaters and working in the high complications department. But everywhere they were firing people. And at one point I was talking with Philippe Dufour about it, if he knew something, because at that time I get to know Philippe Dufour through Vianney, because they worked together and I was in the academy and all this together. And was just good friends as they are today as well. And he told me that there might be a position in the Patek Philippe Museum, because they were searching for people. And also he said, like, with your experience in Denmark from your apprentice time, where you were working with Søren and where we did a lot of museum work, like restoration work, and then later with Vianney, where I learned how to build all the prototypes and micro components and all this. And he said that might be a good match. So I investigated a bit more and talked with a couple of different people that had contact to the museum and worked with them and see if it was true. And then later I made an application for them. And then I get into an interview, and later I get the job after a lot of testing time.
How was it to work with Vianney Halter and later also collaborating with Philippe Dufour on a certain level? How was that influence on your work and your way of looking at watchmaking?
It was very influential because Vianney and also Dufour, they work like in a very different manner as compared to the rest of the watchmaking industry. First of all, is the thing with like being able to do everything, both like the movement, cases, and dials, and so on. That can completely liberate you to create what you want, and you're not really you're like truly independent. And that was like a huge influence, and also just being in these places, there come so many interesting people. I mean, just Vianney himself, being with him, everybody who have been with Vianney but know he's like an immensely intelligent person who is like super interesting to be around, and learning all these techniques at that time. There was nowhere else. Didn't know it at the time that I'd really fall into this like kind of universe and workshop. But there's very, very few places where you, as a watchmaker, one day you're making wheels and pinion, and the next day you are setting up like a tourbillon or something, and then you work with cases and learn case making and dials and so on. So there was really a place where you get to know and learn like the handcraft and watchmaking in the tiniest and the most minute details.
Could we say that the idea to become an independent watchmaker and creating your own first pieces may have started when you collaborated with Vianney and Philippe Dufour? Or was it something that you thought about it before?
I mean, I started watchmaking because I found a book about George Daniels, who was basically doing independent watchmaking before everybody else. And I read that book, and I thought that's what I want to do, like build watches. So, and then Vianney was a way to get into that decision because he was doing it, and I could get a position in his place. So I knew from the beginning that I wanted to create watches. That was my idea from the beginning, from the first day I started in school.
Absolutely. And then after this experience with Vianney, Philippe Dufour, and this great opportunity you got, you started at Patek Philippe in June 2009, when the curator was still Arnaud Tellier, and left almost a decade later, already under the direction of Dr. Peter Fries. How was the admission process, and what were your first impressions during the first few months in the position?
I mean, it was a complete different world than what I came from. Independent watchmaking, it's more you have to create everything, and there's not really nothing is really like organized, because it's yourself who have to organize everything. And when you come into like a big company and a super well run and organized company like Patek Philippe, it's a very different world. So the first impression was that this is like a super well run company, where we come into where everything is like super aligned and streamlined, and that was really, really nice. First of all, it was a little bit difficult at first because you're used to taking a lot of the decisions yourself, but afterwards it's super nice that everything is kind of laid out for you.
How was the experience of diving into the secrets of the incredible creations made by so many historical watchmakers and that are today preserved in the museum? That is something outstanding in terms of opportunity for a watchmaker.
Yeah, but it was a huge opportunity to get to work in the museum, because it's like everything that you read about in books, more or less, it's inside that museum or like a similar watch to it. So the ability to see all the different watches and the different way it was built in the different periods, that had something that had really contributed also to my work today. And also the way that they work like 100, 200 years ago is very, very different from what we're doing today. Some things was like, I would say, like better, and something was worse than today. But it was really interesting to have seen it and then be able to take the good things from the different periods afterwards.
And then you also worked on important Patek Philippe timepieces. Let's take just two examples, or we would stay here for a very long time, certainly. For example, the remarkable reference 2499. How was it to dive into this particular timepiece and movement? What kind of impressions did you have about the specifics of the movement of Patek Philippe like this?
Yeah, when you're at that time, Patek was using a base movement of the Valjoux. I think it's built on the Valjoux 23. And I have made many Valjoux 23 before, but when you see them, when they have been through the hands of Patek, they are absolutely incredible. I mean, they made so many modifications to them, and the finishing on the movements is just amazing. And also from a technical point, they changed on a chronograph on the normal Valjoux, like the driver wheel, the one that drives the chronograph that sits on top of the second wheel, the one that have the second hand on. That is pressed on, and when you have to take it off as a watchmaker, it's really easy to bend the wheel, and the chronographs will not work afterwards. Patek have developed the system where the wheel is lying underneath the bridge, and then have like another clutch device instead for engaging the chronograph. And this system was just like brilliant compared to the normal Valjoux. And so to get handed a piece like that and see how it's made inside, and see also what was interesting at that time was it was all of them is a little bit different, because all of them is made by different watchmakers that was making like their own little signatures on them, and like one made a bridge a tiny bit different than the other one, so there's this kind of like difference in all the movements. But it was extraordinary to see watchmaking at that level. That was something I hadn't seen before.
Absolutely. And the second Patek Philippe was a remarkable piece, the superlative example known as the 34C, a tourbillon movement that can rightfully be considered as having a true racing pedigree. In this case, I believe you worked on both the square and the round-shaped movements. Am I correct?
Yes, I did both of them, like both the square, the 34T, and then also the round one that was later cased up by Philippe Stern and won by him. And I think the reference was 3966, or someone can look it up. And those movement was absolutely amazing, because they were made for the observatory competition by the team. Like the most famous, of course, there's many people working on them, but the most famous one was André Bonin, and then the other one, Sibak, who was regulating them. When you look inside the watches and how they did regulate them, that was really interesting. Also, the level of perfections there are in these movements, especially the square movement, the 34T. There's not really enough space for all the parts. Because the tourbillon is absolutely humongous compared to other tourbillon movements. So there's only kind of space only for the tourbillon and the barrel, and the whole gear train is kind of built on top of the tourbillon in order to accommodate it. And also when you see under the dial side, there's absolutely no space for the parts, so they have to make a very clever system to get the parts and get able to set the hands, and there's like a row of a lot of pinions just to get in and set the hands in the middle of the watch. So this was really interesting, and the round one was just extraordinary. I mean, that's some of the best like watchmaking I've seen, and the most that was really like if you get like a super famous Formula One car, and everything was like just perfect made, and also like perfect design, because a lot of prototype watches, especially from the observatory, there was not much finish on them, and they were just made for one sole purpose, that was to win the competition. But these watches, they're both beautiful designed and executed, and also like decorated with extraordinary finish in the end.
I couldn't end this important chapter in your life as a watchmaker without mentioning what I consider to be the holy grail of all timekeepers of the 20th century. I'm meaning the Henry Graves Supercomplication. I believe you mentioned that you were so lucky to have had the opportunity to work on it after it was sold by Sotheby's in Geneva on November 2014. That has to be one of the highlights of your watchmaker's career.
Yes, absolutely. I cannot really tell where, but I had the opportunity to see inside it. I have not restored it, but we have an opportunity to see and work inside the watch, and this was absolutely amazing. Also, because when you think about a watch like this, first of all, it's basically the most complicated watch in the world for its time, before the Caliber 89, and And then when it's constructed, I think it was in 1925. At that time, they didn't have computers; they have nothing. And then to squeeze in like 2,500 parts in such a small watch is like relative to how complicated it is. That was mind blowing to just to see inside, and also how well executed it is. Because a lot of watches, when they get very complicated, you have to squeeze everything in there. But that was like so well thought of that was really impressive. Also because the movement is it have two sides, and all the indications where you have the celestial map, that one is running on celestial time. So it's run with the speed of the Earth, because the Earth is not turning around in 24 hours. It turns around in 24 hours and some minutes, some seconds. And then the celestial map is turning with that speed, and also all the other indications of the sunrise and sunset. So the movements kind of have two sides, where it you have the barrel, and then you have the gear train that goes down to the escapement, and that give like normal mean time out of on one side. And then there's a system where it splits it out in a celestial time that goes on the back side, and then run this whole movement on the back. So to see this kind of watch, that was amazing.
Was it scary at first?
Yes, absolutely. But I mean, you have to, when you do this kind of jobs, you have to leave all that aside. That is something when you get into watchmaking, you get these very important pieces and very like high value important pieces. You cannot really afford, or you cannot, like you cannot sit and be scared, or cannot sit and think, okay, if I drop this, if I lose this screw, like it's worth, I don't know, 20,000 or something. So that's not something you can think about. But I had that in my apprentice time, because I used to work for a restoration during my apprentice time, where we restored a lot of very famous pieces here in Denmark, and also from famous makers like Tompion and so on.
It's a big piece, so it's a bad choice of words, but it's a chunky watch. I believe it's relatively different to work on such a dimension. It's the parts are bigger, components are more expressive in terms of size, of course. How was it in terms of assembling, disassembling, the characteristics of the movement?
On that one, it was very well made and very easy. The more, let's say, the better the quality of a watch, the easier it is to take apart and assemble. And there, the Graves watch, that was very, very well made and very easy and very I'll not say logical, but it is. I mean, it's highly complicated, but you can find the logic in the components, and then take it apart in a way that is safe for the piece, and also where you can put it back together again.
Mm-hmm. There is like a thought process in the conception of the piece. When you see one thing comes after the other, and then that helps you when assembling and disassembling.
Yes, I have like a little bit photographic memory, so I can kind of remember where the pieces are. And when that fails, I have photos to back it up. And then also when we take apart like very complicated watches, and also just minute repeaters and like complicated watches, we have like trays where there's like 50 rooms in, and those trays can be stacked. So we kind of take apart one section and put in one room, and the next room, and so on. And those ones are in rows, and then afterwards we just go backwards, and then it kind of gives itself where the pieces have to be.
Mm-hmm. And then you just left the Patek Philippe Museum. Why on earth did you do such a thing?
Yeah, there was like many things that kind of contribute to it. First of all, I have worked in Patek Philippe for like 10 years almost. And it was time for me, I think, to do something else. We're a very little team. And I think even if you work, as I said, like in a Formula One museum, then after a while, it also just get like as a normal job. So for me, I was searching for new things to do. And then the second of all was like we had talked a long time about going back to Denmark again. And we have got like 2 sons, and the oldest was so old that he had to start in school as 4 years old in Switzerland. So we thought it was a good time to change location at that time.
Exactly, because you are married. Your wife is actually a master engraver.
Yes, absolutely. My wife, Hannelore, is known for her artist name Gravalance. You can find her on Instagram. She's from Germany and is educated in Germany in the drawing academy there for as a hand engraver. And the jobs there is mostly like making coin stamps and the watermark bills, the stamping plate for bills and so on. But she was also very inspired by watches. She's also a watchmaker. That's what I wanted to say. So first watchmaker, and then afterwards engraver, and then later she got to work for Vianney Halter, and that was where I met her. And then we've been together since then, and I'm married today.
And I believe your decision to leave the Patek Philippe Museum, leave Switzerland, come back to Denmark, was also related with the dream you had to produce your own watches. And now we have the Christian Lars brand. You're a maker of watches, and you have your first piece already delivered, and you keep on producing this model. Tell us about this creation of yours.
Yeah, that's right. So today I create my own watches in my own name, and that started, of course, after I left Patek. We first I made like restoration jobs for collectors in around in Europe and sometimes for auction houses. And then at one point I was in a podcast. The interviewer asked what my dream was, and I said like I would like to make a watch one day. And then I get a call from a collector based in Copenhagen who thought that would be an interesting thing. So we worked together for 1.5 years to create a watch, and that became the model I have. That's called like a 30CP, which is a freehand piece with manual winding, and it was a little bit special, like architecture of the movement. And that one, it started out as a little project, and then the project grew and grew and grew, and we came on different podcasts, American podcast, and then later we was on the blog SGX, and then we came on Houdinki, and then from one day to another, the orders just it was just crazy when we went to the Houdinki. We was just sold out within a week, and then I'm making 50 pieces of this watch. So we sold the first 25, and they made like the waiting list for the rest because I want to make sure that I could deliver the watches within reasonable time, and not sell watches that would first come out like 5 6 years from now. That would be a little bit ridiculous. So
Yeah.
but it has been like a really interesting process. And first of all, going from being able to make one watch and then build a little team, get the machinery we needed and the facility for like a bigger workshop and so on. And then slowly it's growing bigger. So now we have delivered the first piece, and then the next pieces are coming out here doing the start of the next year.
And we have to say this movement, the 30CP, is a concept that you have developed. So you're using, I think you don't produce the gear wheels, but everything else is made by you and designed by you in terms of the concept of the watch itself.
Yes, exactly. I mean, the gear train comes from a watch from the 50s, is from Gerard Piagot or GP27, which is a special version of the Alfred Schild watch. And there we take the gear train from, and then the rest is made in-house in our workshop. So if we come back a little bit to what I have saw with also when I worked with Vianney, then when you are free to create everything, you're not locked by anything, and then you can start to play around with the parts and make something that is not made before.
Mhm.
So independent watchmaking, you would often take like a base movement, and then you change the bridges to give it a different appearance, and then you would order in a case maker a case, and in a dial maker a dial, and so on. We wanted to be able to create everything, so we have made like the movement itself. We made like main plates and bridges and everything in between, and then we created like a special system for regulating the hairspring, where we have like a ruby ball, and on top of that there's a bridge that is then controlled by 3 screws, and then we can move that bridge in every direction we want, like up and down, and then tilt it forward and backwards and so on, and thereby we can adjust the hairspring so it's lying like perfectly flat, and we can do that like very precisely and easy with this system.
That system was inspired by an existing piece?
Yes, it is inspired. It's not something I came up with. It's I have seen it first in Breguet marine chronometers that I restored, and also some other marine chronometers also have this system where you have this kind of tripod where the hairspring is mainly like cylindrical hairsprings. They are connected to that. First, we tried to make like a similar setup where we have like the bridge is standing on 3 screws and then like a fourth one to lock it. But it was very difficult because it was too small. So as soon as we just touched one of the screws, the whole bridge was moving around and it was impossible to position it correct. And then we came up with a system with the ruby ball that is like a fixation point that it can move around on top and slide in all that direction, but it will always be fixed in the right position because of the shape of the ball.
And it's a remarkable system. I challenge everyone to go search Christian Lars' timepieces in the internet and just look at this part because it's really different and out of the ordinary. But Christian, your life doesn't revolve only about watches exclusively. You are a biker and a traveler, and you already have some serious miles behind you in that capacity. Tell us a bit about this passion of yours.
I always have the passion to discover new thing, if it had been like within the technical region or like in the world or whatever, and especially traveling. I really like that. And it's not like I travel to a certain destination. I just start either the car or the motorcycle and then I drive and then I see what comes up. And the longest journey I've done that is on a motorcycle. That was when I was in Switzerland. I drove from Geneva to Ulaanbaatar in Mongolia, and then back again. So it was a journey on 25,000 kilometers in 3 months, and we went through Ukraine, Russia, Kazakhstan, Mongolia, Moldova.
Incredible.
That was a really, really interesting thing.
Did you make that trip alone, or you took Hannelore with you?
No, Hannelore is not so fond of traveling on motorcycles. So I had a friend with me that I have. He is a molecular biologist doing like cancer research in a university, and he have a Polish background, so he speak fluent Russian. So that was really a great help when we was traveling in these regions.
And you keep on making trips with your bike? Is it something you have to do every year? How do you deal with this urge?
Yeah, with the urge, yeah, that's the thing. At the moment, it's quite a while since I took like a really big tour. But I like to take tours just around here in Denmark and Scandinavia. But now we have the companies coming up, and we have 2 kids. That's one on 4 years and one on 7 years old. So at the moment, it's not really time for taking a couple of months off to do something. But later, we'll see what comes.
Absolutely. Christian, it was a great pleasure to talk to you. Thank you so much.
You're very welcome. It was really nice to be on the show.
So that's it. Thank you all for listening. And if you have enjoyed this podcast, please like and subscribe. And also remember following us on any podcast player you enjoy using in order not to miss our future recordings. Thank you very much for listening. This is Carlos Torres for Collectability.